Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
Excellent.
Everybody looking good, huh?
Yup.
Why, thank you. You're looking good yourself.
Oh my goodness.
We got a lot of people on the call. That's good.
Yeah.
That is.
Okay.
Good.
Never know about the first of the month.
Yeah, especially holidays, first of the month.
First of the month, I thought. Good day.
So just so that everyone knows, before we get started, I'm not sure who's going to open up, if it's Jaleel or James, but this is being recorded. And so, and afterwards, you will be able to retrieve it from our YouTube channel that we have. And Lorraine is our backdoor host who's hosting the Zoom. And I'm pretty sure in the past, she put in the chat box where you can pull the Zoom recording. So that information will be shared at some point. But at this time, I'm going to hand it to our president of our Youth and College Division, Mr. Jaleel Baker.
President Betty. Betty helped us set up and coordinate this event, and we're very happy to be here and being able to have the opportunity to impart some important information on everybody. So we've been working hard. We've tried to connect with as many people as we could, and we tried to make sure that we got the best questions we can and set up 3 events that would inform the community about domestic violence increases and also other forms of abuse that this audience might be, privy to and might understand or might need to know about. So we tried to create the most expansive program that we could. And so each event will take place in the next 2 Tuesdays of December. So we have another event on December 8th, Tuesday next week, and the following week, Tuesday, December 15th, and they'll all be at 6 p.m. So we encourage everybody to come to each of those events, as these events are ideally supposed to build on top of each other and give as much information as we can throughout the 3 seminars. So this one will be an introductory event, and I'll pass to James and Aaliyah, who will be moderating tonight's event and will help get things started. So thank y'all, and let's go, James and Aaliyah.
Yeah, let's get this started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first domestic violence seminar. I'm James Brown, and I'll be one of your MCs at this event.
Hey guys, my name is Aaliyah Gaffney. I'm also one of your MCs, and I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. We have a great session in store for you guys.
First, we want to introduce all of our NAACP Youth Council members. So I guess Jaleel has kind of introduced himself, but I guess we can start with me. I'm currently serving as the Vice President of NAACP Youth Council, and then I'll give it to Aaliyah.
And as of right now, I'm serving as the Secretary for the Youth Council. I'll go ahead and pass it to Preatty.
My name is Preatty Gates. I'm sorry, I'm in the same room as my sister. I told her to join. My name is Preatty Gates. I'm currently serving as the Vice President as well, and I'll pass it to AJ.
Good morning, everyone. My name is AJ. I serve as the Empowerment and Employment Chairperson.
And I am Deshaunus Gray. I
I'm
am
going to
the
pass it over.
And my job is just to help these young folks whenever they ask me to.
Thank you guys.
Go on, Aaliyah. You can go.
Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. Now I'd like to take a moment and let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. Is it okay if we start with David?
Hello, everyone. My name is David Watson. I've had a few technology issues, but got it figured out. Let me walk to a better location. I know I'm in the dark and I apologize. All right, so my name is David Watson. I currently am a vice principal at a school in Seattle, Washington. Born and raised in California, born and raised in Sacramento, as a matter of fact. So I love my city, love my state. I spent some time working in law enforcement in the correctional environment, and I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for coming. Can we go with Patrice?
Oh, am I muted?
I think you're muted.
No, yeah, you started off unmute. Oh, now you're back.
Okay,
We're good.
okay, sorry. So hi, I'm Patrice Gully. I am a social worker for Sacramento County. Born and raised in Sacramento, attended Sacramento State University, and just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And how about Tamara?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Tamara Fleming. I am a social worker for Sac County CPS currently, and I've done some work with WEAVE, Women Escaping a Violent Environment. I've worked in the community with several agencies, volunteering and the likes. And so I am passionate about giving back to the community, and this is no different, this program here. So thank you all for inviting me, and I look forward to this evening.
Thank you for coming. And last but not least, Daphne.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daphne Gauthier, and I'm with the Mindsets Counseling and Coaching Center. My previous experiences, I've worked in police department for 18 years, trained police officers. Also, my experiences, I used to teach how to obtain a restraining order for people who were involved in domestic violence. I'm also currently the treasurer for the NAACP.
Thank you for coming out.
Mhm. I wanted to again thank our panelists so much for being with us tonight. So this seminar's focus will be an overall introduction to the different types of domestic violence. Our panelists will discuss topics like how to identify an abusive situation, statistics of violence during COVID, health effects of domestic violence, and many more.
Having the skills to identify when you or someone you know is being abused is very important, and it's one of the reasons why we're having this training today. This is only one of the first of our 3 trainings, which we'll be holding every Tuesday of December. Our next one will be next Tuesday, and the Tuesday following that at 6 p.m. We'll be covering other topics as well. So please make sure you attend and invite others. Thank you.
Okay, so it's time to get this conversation started. So I would like to pose our first question to the panelists. What are the different types of abuse that we should all be aware of? And everyone can answer at different times and just kind of get into the conversation and identifying what types of abuses there are out there.
Okay. Well, I'll go first. There's several types, but we do have other panelists, so I'll just go over a couple that I wanted to highlight for this discussion, especially considering we have high school, teenagers, and college youth here. So one that I learned specifically with WEAVE, outside of the typical physical abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse, is the spiritual abuse that takes place. That's a part of domestic violence. And another that is not highlighted a lot is the technology abuse. And using that, just like I said, for the audience we have, the technology abuse mainly involves the social media aspect, maybe posting negative videos of the person that you're with, maybe negative pictures, negative comments, things harassing the person that you're supposed to be in a relationship with as a way to get back at them. And power and control is at the root of all of this for when it comes to domestic violence. And so I wanted to highlight those because those are not the typical domestic violence forms of abuse that we tend to look at. So the spiritual abuse being, if you're a religious person, or maybe you're, raised in a church, you have a relationship with your significant other, and they use certain biblical contexts or principles against you to try and get you to stay or to force you to do what they want you to do. So for example, Bible making references to women being submissive, or the man being the head of the household. And so those type of things a perpetrator can use over their victim to hold them hostage, in their mind, not necessarily verbally or physically abusing them, but getting them to a mindset to where they don't want to leave, or they feel like they can't because of the spiritual aspect of it, and then the technology aspect of it. So I just wanted to highlight those initially, and I'll let the other panelists talk about the ones that they chose.
Okay, I can go next. I'll discuss two of the common abuses that we all often hear about is physical abuse and sexual abuse. So physical abuse is, hitting, being assaulted, getting slapped, physical marks, injury to yourself. That's considered physical abuse. And sexual abuse is, rape, inappropriate touch, non-consensual contact, indecent exposure, and even photography. So those are a few examples of physical and sexual abuse.
I can cover the emotional abuse because that's what I deal with most, dealing with my clients as a counselor. So part of the things I see with the emotional abuse is how when you actually either tear them down by your words, call them names, or you really work on their psychological of just taking away their self-worth and self-esteem to where the people, get to a point where they just don't feel valued, and so emotionally, it really, really affects the mental state. I mean, in all aspects, whether socially, academically, occupational, relational, it hits in every of those areas when somebody is emotionally abused.
And to kind of just kind of piggyback off all those, one type of abuse that for me, when I was in my law enforcement career, that really stood out. And a lot of it started off with domestic violence. And that was pretty much a type of modern slavery, which is human trafficking. And so what happens with human trafficking, you have individuals that are lured from one place to another place. It could be across state lines, across country, from another country in general. And there's such a humongous form of manipulation that is implemented during these times. What happens is an individual is put in a position to where they feel as if they have no self-worth. They're not important. No one loves them. They are stuck. That sense of manipulation is just so rampant to where the individual believes that all they can do is follow the words or the movements or the directions of the perpetrator. And so when those types of things happen, I've been in situations where a shipping container of individuals was sent from another country that landed over here in Seattle, and it was not a pretty sight. And so that's, that type of abuse is just something that it's prominent, but it's just not out in the open to where a lot of people can see it.
Thank you guys so much for your responses. We'd like to move on to the next question, which is, what are some signs?
I think the same order of panelists should be fine, but it's up to you however you want to do it.
Yeah, I'll go. I just didn't want to So there's several ways that you'll know that you're in a domestic violence relationship, or your friends. So I'll start with recognizing others. I do want to first say that typically we can recognize something in others before we do ourselves. So both, these can actually go for both of us, the person who's in it and the person that you're looking at, but the perspective is just different. So for example, if you find yourself being intimidated, often walking around on eggshells, not sure about how you should say things, what you should say, because you want to make sure that you don't set them off so that they can, start verbally, physically, whatever their form of abuse is. So if you find yourself walking on eggshells, you have to really think hard about what you say. You can't really be who you are. You're probably in an abusive relationship. Another way that you can tell is if you have someone who is consistently obsessed with what you wear, how you act, telling you who your friends are, who you can hang with, who you can talk to, you cannot, trying to isolate you. Because the isolation is also, this is all rooted in the power and control. The goal is to isolate you, to make you feel as if you don't have an outlet, or no one cares, or no one is going to believe you, or either that no one is going to love you or care for you like they do. So if you find that someone is trying to force you to be someone that you're not, that you're likely in an abusive relationship. As far as identifying, I'll just say one, if you have a friend, like those can go for identifying a friend or an acquaintance who's in a relationship. But when you have people who are completely isolated, maybe they used to hang out with you a lot more, you can call them readily, and now they're saying, well, I can't do this because my mate doesn't want me to, or I can't go here, I can't wear this, I can't engage. That's a form of isolation. So those are some of the signs that you can look at to see that you're an abusive or someone else is.
I can go next. Some signs that I look for if someone is in an abusive relationship is a change in hygiene patterns. A lot of times individuals will feel like, they may not want to take showers and things of that nature because they want to try to do things to turn that other individual off. Loss of friends, that sense of isolation, that sense of fear. And other things that usually stick out is someone pretty much takes you away from your family. So that's kind of like on that isolation sense. One other thing that I noticed was you just never, a person is pretty much kept indoors, phone calls stop, just more on that isolation realm.
Yeah. David and Tamara pretty much touched on a lot of things I was going to say, but another indication that you're in an abusive relationship is if your partner is always putting you down, if they're always gaslighting you, saying, oh, you're just being over dramatic, making you feel like you're not good enough, trying to tear you down emotionally. There's also signs to look for yourself. And then others, like Tamara and David said, it could be, your friends they're depressed, they're not acting like themselves, they're isolating from you, just a few signs.
I think you got everything. I like the part about not acting themselves. And so someone, when you think they're in an abusive relationship, pay attention to their actions. Mm-hmm. Because isolation is one of them, but sometimes, listen to the things they say. Like if they always got to check in, with their partner or something, that could be a sign. Or they seem to be fidgety if you want to go somewhere and they're fidgety about the time, and you kind of wonder like, what's going on? What is all this you're doing? Those are different things, just to kind of start asking questions to that person, and more so just kind of just enlighten to see if, what their responses would be. The other part is how about if you're in an abusive relationship, one of the things that I see, and it more so in younger people, is when you have a girlfriend or boyfriend who's really jealous. Mm-hmm. And they seem, and this is the signs you guys talked about, where they're constantly checking in on you, wonder what you're doing. And sometimes that person interprets that as, oh, they love me so much, they're checking on me all the time. No, that is what I call an indicator. Pay attention to that. So if someone's in that type of relationship, The other thing is being blamed on a lot of times. You'll get people to where listen to when they take fault in a lot of things that don't even resonate with them. I remember working in the police department, and we literally would get phone calls, women being beaten just because their husband lost their football game, you know, and they were blaming the wife. And how could you blame the wife when you're not even playing the game, you know? So it's just different things that trigger people. And I heard somebody mention different triggers, you know, that people, you know, like they said, trying not to be themselves and trying to make sure they don't say the wrong thing that's going to trigger someone for them to get either verbally abused or physically abused.
Thank you so much for your answers. Now that we've identified what we need to look for to determine if someone is in an abusive situation, I think it's important that we talk about the impacts of domestic violence, what that can have, what that can be on your health as well. So how does the domestic violence impact someone's mental health and physical health?
Domestic violence, negatively impacts individuals in a number of ways. Mentally, it can create depression. It can create stress, anxiety. It can even go into the post-traumatic stress disorder to where, you know, you can't, even if you're out of the situation, you find yourself out of it, you still have, you know, PTSD, you still find yourself being stressed out by images, or, you know, when you're going to sleep, sometimes you may have nightmares about it. So domestic violence also triggers physical issues in terms of the stress can lead to sicknesses like different illnesses. Stress has been widely known to lead to cancer. Other health issues, high blood pressure, stroke, you know, and even death. So I think just the wear and tear that it has on your body mentally and physically, domestic violence, it has the capability to destroy, you know, all of who you are as an individual. And I think it's important that we pay attention to that and not just dismiss, you know, that maybe it's just oh, well, he'll hit me one time, he only did it once, but then now it's the emotional, because that emotional stress and abuse can have a toll on your body as well. Long-term effects, you know, maybe when you're younger, it's not going to show up as much, but long-term, there's several mental and physical effects, negative effects that domestic violence has.
Mentally, you know, just imagine, you know, an individual thinking that their self-worth is less than anyone else, or I can never do anything right, I'm never going to be good enough. You know, so many of these different traumatic experiences really makes an individual feel as if they just are not what they should be. You know, and on that mental and physical side, you know, different triggers, as they say, are, you know, different outcomes. It could be someone starts cutting, someone starts taking medication, someone starts, you know, utilizing drugs, you know, to try to either cure some type of pain or just to have some type of outlet to where that might take away some of that pain. You know, that's a few of the mental sides of it. It's just that feeling that you just aren't good enough, you know, and we have too much of that going on right now as it is. So, you know, it's that feeling that it doesn't matter what the situation is, you can never make things right. You just can't do things right, and you can never satisfy that other individual. And you really start, you know, mentally, it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like that Stockholm syndrome. At the end of the day, it's like, oh, I did something, and that's why this happened. So it's like you did something to deserve what happened. So it's just like more of that mind manipulation. Physically, you know, loss of weight. Like I said, hygiene issues before. You know, it could be loss of weight or you can gain a lot of weight. Just different things that you know, individuals experience based on those claims, based on the fact that those types of things happen, just puts an individual to where they are just not their best self. And if you're not your best self, you're not going to be the best, you know, the best you that you can be. Also, you know, mentally, imagine something like this happens in homes. So it's not just the victim that is a victim. There's children in the house that are victims as well. There's children in the house that could possibly see this. And we already know statistics show if family members, especially young boys, if they grow up and they see someone putting hands on someone in their family, then there's that click that where maybe this is how things are supposed to be. This is what you do when you love someone. And that's the worst part of domestic violence, because that cycle continues. So that mental and physical aspect of it, it just manifests into, you know, the next generation, to where they think this is normal, this is how things are.
I like what you said, David, because you just hit on the great point that this is learned behavior, you know, and when you're in the home and you see it happening, you kind of normalize it, you know. And I've been working with a couple of couples. I don't want to use the word reprogramming, but changing the mindset of how we're supposed to treat each other, especially when they have children in the home, you know, so our children can learn how we're supposed to treat one another. When it comes to the physical, you know, you can see physical, emotional, the verbal is what you can't see. And sometimes people, when they're in an abusive relationship, when it's emotional, sometimes, you know, they don't always hit you, but they emotionally tear you down. And then all of a sudden, it's like Tamara said, you have all these ailments, you know, that come into chronic disease and all kind of things. What I see happening and comes to my office is when they go to the doctor because they have a lot of gastric problems, or their stomach is always upset and they don't know why. And the doctor runs all these tests and they go, we can't find anything wrong with you. So then they send you to a therapist and they come see me. And as we start breaking down what's going on, then they finally realize the emotional abuse that they endured, that they had normalized. It became part of who they were. And then from there, it's work to be done. Because when you talk about the physical or emotional abuse, it mentally can really tear a person down. And like you guys mentioned, the self-esteem and self-worth, that people come in and they feel like, you know, that they can't do any better, they can't get any better, you know, and so they settle. And in that settlement, you know, they're living in so much pain that it takes work to even try to get them to understand that they do have a self-worth. And I mean, sometimes it takes years to get them to understand that they are valued and they are somebody.
Yeah. And I just want to add about the physical abuse. A lot of times, people really experience, you know, traumatic injuries from, you know, abuse. I've worked with a couple of clients where they've been pushed out of cars, you know, a moving car, you know, they've had their jaw broken, you know, by their partner, spouse. So some of the physical, you know, injuries that you sustain in domestic violence relationships, you know, really cause you to have medical bills or financial, you know, problems, because you have to have medical and pay for your broken jaw. So it's, you know, physical abuse, just the physical aspect of it is important too, because you sustain, you know, traumatic injuries a lot of times.
I want to add to that we haven't touched on another type of abuse, and that is financial.
Mm-hmm.
I hold the money, I hold the power, you can't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people stay in these relationships because mentally they are programmed to believe they have no choice. That's why it's important to understand the resources that are available. So we didn't mention the financial piece, and that's another huge piece that also affects people, you know, is that they feel like they're stuck, and so they stay and endure the abuse.
And to add on to that, like that feeling of codependency, because you have others that might feel like, hey, I just want to stay with him. He's just a really good guy. I want to make sure I know I can help him. I know I can get him on the right track. And before you know it, you know, years pass and you're still in that same situation. Mm-hmm. And it's 10 times worse. And you're still trying to find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that says, hey, everything's going to be okay. And you just never find it.
We also highlight, like what you just said, David, the years and years you spend of trying to change someone, or it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting physically abused in that relationship. That's not good for you. It can be years of emotional abuse and stress that we're not properly identifying as abuse. And then you stay for years and your thing is, well, at least he's not hitting me. He's working, he's going to work every day, he's providing, but the emotional abuse is just as damaging as the physical abuse. So as you stated, the years, allowing that to go on for years and years, that will silently take a toll. Yeah, you're not getting hit upside your head, but you're inside, you know, when you're constantly feeling that emotional abuse, that psychological abuse from the person who's supposed to love you or who says that they love and care for you, that also silently takes a toll. And you can hide it better because then you're able to say, well, no, he's a good person. He's not, at least he's not hitting me, but it's still just as damaging nonetheless.
Do you all mind if I add an additional question to this particular topic in terms of, you know, working with youth and then pairing that with some cultural things? It was mentioned the effect that it can have on youth witnessing it. Can you all talk about in your experience, you know, what your experience and research says in terms of balancing the fine line between rearing and abuse, right? And so what do you guys see and what do studies say in terms of if child rearing has that outcome, and then what's the line and how can people recognize that?
Well, yeah, there's definitely studies, there's assessments that are done, especially in my profession, that definitely show that child rearing, having, you know, exposure to domestic violence and those ages as a young child, it does give you the impression or it gives you the idea that that's normal behavior. So then you start to continue that behavior. And there is a statistic out that does show that a lot of the domestic violence perpetrators have experienced domestic violence either themselves or have witnessed it as a child, which is still experiencing it. So there definitely is a correlation between experiencing it and seeing that as a child as to how you would then, how you would operate or interact with within an intimate partner relationship. And I think that what that question, it kind of draws or highlights that society has a greater problem. The domestic violence is a result of an even larger problem that we're not necessarily dealing with more effectively, like the doctor stated, the socioeconomic instability that someone may feel. So then you feel like if you have no education, no resources, no housing, no job, whatever it is that you're lacking that's causing you to stay with someone, that has to be, I think, addressed on a larger scale than what even, you know, this panel can address. But obviously domestic violence is a result of that. But I think digging a little deeper into the root cause of why people do what they do in terms of the exposure to it, or whether or not, you know, it's frustration because of, you know, maybe I don't have a job, the mate, you know, is looking for a way to provide for their family, frustrated they can't do it. So it's a larger issue, but the domestic violence piece, I think it's good that we pay attention to that just so that we can see, you know, how it's affecting us. But there is a greater, you know, aspect that needs to be addressed too.
Right.
Shaughnessy, I was going to say, just before you asked that question, and this is more for the younger, is that when we're in the home, our mental mindset changes when we see our parents doing this, right? And then at some point it becomes normalized within that family or culture, or whatever you want to call it. But especially when you see your parents fight and love again, you know, one minute we're fighting, next minute we're getting along. After a while, it's almost like, you know what, this is my environment, not knowing sometimes that it's not, that environment is not healthy. We think it's normal. So when we go off and we get boyfriends or girlfriends and we get into this cycle, then if the boyfriend abuses us or calls me out of my name, well, I heard my dad say it to my mom, or I heard my mom say it to my dad. So you know what, that's no big deal. My mom, she handled it. My dad handled it. So, you know, that's no biggie. And so I think it's that piece that when you talk about the mental state, when it doesn't have to be said to it, because, you know, we'll tell a child in a minute, don't let no one treat you like that. But then guess what? We're showing them something totally different. We're showing them that we can be treated like that and we accept it. So I think for that, with the mental mindset, it does make, I would say, a person growing up normalize that it's okay when it's really not.
Yeah. And I would just like to add to that, that it does cause a cycle, because that's your normal. So of course, when you grow up and get into a relationship, that's your normal. So of course, I'm going to do it to my partner, or I'm going to accept it from my partner, because I grew up, like she said, my dad hit my mom and that was okay. My dad cussed out my mom. My mom, hit my dad. So that's their new normal. So it's just a generational cycle that continues to, develop. And so they don't, people don't realize, well, no, that's not normal, but that's their reality. So people's, their perception is their reality. So that's it.
Sorry, Patrice, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Worked at a prison in Central California, and we had a domestic violence program within the prison. So if someone is on the streets and they commit that crime, they go to prison, they have to complete a certain amount of classes inside prison to get a certificate. So once they are released from prison, and I realized this when I was a parole agent, because I would supervise individuals on the streets, they still have to complete another 52-week domestic violence class. And so what happens is this: inside the prison, we have these classes, and I walked in there just to sit in on them, just kind of see what they're about. And I want to say 85% of the students or the inmates that were in that class in prison grew up with abuse in the home. So they grew up seeing their father abuse their mother, or the male figure in the house abuse a female figure in the house. They grew up thinking that that was normal. Yeah. That's what they thought. So as they got older, they're in for the same crime, the same offense. And the big difference with it is some people were like, hey, yeah, I did it. All right. Other people didn't own it. They're like, well, I did it, but I was drunk at the time. So there's that little precursor that says, oh, well, I did it, but because I was drinking at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. Still doesn't make it okay. But my next question was, with them, I was like, okay, so if you're in here for that, you have kids, just about everybody has kids. What are your kids doing right now? You're not here, you're not with your kids right now to let them know, because you can come to class all day long and apologize for it, but you're not with your kids right now to let them know that that's not right. Or we don't do those types of things. Or, young men, we're going to be raised to protect the women in our family. So then fast forward, now I'm a parole agent, decide to walk into a couple of domestic violence classes and make sure individuals I was supervising were in those classes. I walk in there and it's the same. I saw 3 faces that I recognized from prison that I worked at. What are you doing now? You talking to your kids? Watson, I'm letting them know exactly what I did was wrong. We're working together and so on and so forth, which is great. But if you look at 85% of the individuals in that class, and then I see 3 of them, and 3 of them are working with their kids, those numbers are off. And so when it comes to those types of issues at home, that's when we need those fathers, number one, to not even do it, but to teach those young boys, hey, there's a cycle here, and it's a negative cycle. And that negative cycle, because people that look like us are going to be perceived a certain way, that negative cycle needs to stop. And that negative cycle, early intervention is the key. We have to catch these kids young to show them that this is not the way, this is not what should be happening.
Thank you guys for your passionate responses. I love the fact that we talked about whether or not you are the person being abusive or receiving the abuse. It does start at home, which leads us to my next statement and question. With the current state of COVID-19 in America, it's likely that we'll face another lockdown. Sacramento right now is in purple tier 1, which means no movie theaters, no restaurants, no fitness centers. So that leads me to my question of, how has COVID and how will COVID affect the rate of domestic violence and abuse cases? And how could another shutdown affect those cases even further?
This one is twofold. So we have the COVID, which is creating, well, according to some media reports, that the police is reporting that they're getting an increased incidence of people reporting domestic violence. However, I would like to just see the real statistics on like which communities those are, because the people who are reporting it are likely people who would maybe, whether there was the COVID situation or not, but as we know in our Black community, it's going to create an even greater case of isolation because we have no outlets. We don't have the support that we normally would have. In terms of some of the agencies, the domestic violence agencies have cut back on the in-person, some of the just community resources that people typically go in to speak with, and then they may report that they're having issues of domestic violence, but now that they're isolated even more, those reports are going to go down in certain communities because for one, we don't typically in our community, we don't trust law enforcement. So you're not going to get a lot of people calling law enforcement. And then you're going to have the issue where some of us have already discussed that there's some people who aren't really living in reality in terms of what type of abusive relationship they're in. So they're not going to assign the appropriate level of attention to it because of the fact that they're dismissive or normalizing the behaviors. So I've seen some reports that say that the domestic violence reports are going down overall because of that aspect, because we don't have the outlets and the community resources that we typically can contact. And then you have the kids are at home as well. The kids a lot of times report it to their teachers, and we know school is online, so then that outlet is taken away. So I would be curious to see, I have not seen any research that breaks it down to a community aspect, but I do hear what you're saying in terms of the media reporting that they have gotten increased reports of domestic violence in terms of people calling 911. But then again, who are those people? Probably people who typically would call anyway, but maybe now that they're in close quarters with their spouses, people who are not usually in domestic violence are having those problems now. So I think there's a lot of layers to that, but just the isolation piece to that is automatically going to increase the cases because you don't have to work hard to isolate your victim.
Right. And I just want to piggyback off that and state that according to some research from the National Domestic Violence Hotline, they reported that back in March when COVID-19 really started and got, going, that they were receiving around 2,000 calls per day for domestic violence. And out of those 2,000 calls, 951 of them were related to COVID-19 domestic violence issues. So that was just one statistic that I researched. So cases are, they're going up, but they're not being reported as much as they would if, the victim had a different outlet or was away from their spouse so that they could, report it. But like Tamara said, a lot of the couples are at home together, they're working from home and the children are home. So they don't really have, the space to report it like they would if they were, away. So.
I think, so here's what I believe. I think the numbers are definitely on the rise. And the reason why is because, as within the Black community, our resources are limited compared to other communities. And so, we don't have if you look at jobs by themselves, very hard to find a job in California right now. Mm-hmm. Even harder to find a job during COVID in California right now. It's not like we have a lot of resources where we can just get up and drive our car to wherever we're going and things of that nature to kind of take a break and have some type of outlet because everything is closed down. So a lot of those positive reinforcement activities, can't even go to a Little League game just to kind of get out the house and do a little something different. So when you're stuck in the house all the time, it's like you really have to get along with who's in that house with you. And if you can't, then it's a tough situation. It's to me, it's one of those things where you have individuals that would typically notify law enforcement that something is going on in their neighborhood, but they don't want to disrupt that family, that family atmosphere that they have. We don't have the opportunities. Quite a few of us don't have the opportunities where we can, maintain our household by ourselves. So because of that, you have more blended families. And you'd have people kind of moving into, grandma and grandpa's house because that's what they can afford. So you have families that have to, kind of get together in order to survive now. And sometimes when that happens, people bump heads, and we don't choose our family. Sometimes we fight as family, but at the end of the day, we're still family and we love each other. But the bottom line is, COVID is one of those things where it makes you kind of stay in that space with someone and really try to work things out compared to, I'm just going to go ahead and take off for a little bit, or, whatever it might be. You're kind of forced to stay there and talk it out and work that out. And some people talk with their mouths, other people talk with their fists. So there's just a different dynamic there.
I think part of the whole COVID-19 I believe that it has raised domestic violence, because if you look at the cycle that I see, especially in our community, in our culture, we are more or less blue collar workers or service workers.
Mhm.
And so in most of those jobs were the first ones to be let go. Now I don't have a job, so now my finances, and I have a family to support. So what do? Most of us, they might turn to drugs or alcohol. Now I turn to drug and alcohol. Now what happens? Now I'm starting to abuse someone, and then the cycle gets there. So and then there's no outlet, so that's why we turn to drugs and alcohol. There's nowhere, funny enough, the golf courses are still open is what I hear, but no recreations or no movie theaters, right? Things that we could afford, they shut down. So now we have no outlet, and so in that we stay home, we get a drink, we want to relax, and next thing we know, somebody says the wrong thing, and now the fight is on. And the fight is on from the frustration of really with self, because I lost my job, I can't afford this, and and all these other stresses come on. So with COVID being shut down or shutting down, we're going to see this unless this purple tier changes a little bit to where we can give these people an outlet, or that's fair across the board. Because like I said, the golf courses are still open. I don't play golf, but I'm just saying.
Me neither.
Yeah, so it was touched on a bit when everyone was answering the last question, but I wanted to ask about any statistics that come out that relate to certain communities that related to impacted by domestic violence. And that kind of came out, we started kind of edging toward that topic in the last question. So I guess specifics on what communities are affected by domestic violence the most.
I think we kind of tapped on it. We didn't give numbers, but definitely people of color, and not just African American, Latina, culture. People of color that's really been affected by COVID. And you hear it in the news. Just there's the impact of from the medical perspective of how we are just even getting COVID because we don't have the proper medical care. And then on top of that, a lot of us who are stressed out, they don't go to therapy, because one, we have spiritual and we have family that we use too, but for the most part, we don't have the outlet. So to answer your question, it's people of color. And I think that, without knowing statistics, we know that from a perspective.
Yeah, and adding the distrust of people of color with law enforcement, a lot of it goes unreported. So you have maybe if there's an immigrant who there could be a threat of deportation, so they won't call law enforcement. You have the Black community, which has historically had a distrustful relationship with law enforcement. So that's not going to necessarily be our first call. So even the statistics that we do have, I think are going to be underreported because of the fact that we typically don't want people in our business, quote unquote. So we'll handle things on our own, whether we're getting beat up or not, and not even look at it as being beat up. I had women that I've worked with Weave at one point, and a lot of their responses would be something like, Well, he hit me, but I don't let no man hit me. I, punched him back. So he had a busted lip. So it was mutual combat. So they're not even saying, I'm being abused. So if you feel like I'm fighting him back, so that's not abuse, you're likely not going to pick up the phone and call law enforcement for help. You're going to stay there and fight. And then you're going to downplay its existence. So people of color, we have, a lot more stressors, a lot of, underlying issues, societal, socioeconomic issues that contribute to the reason why we're in that domestic violence relationship. But I truly believe that the statistics are not necessarily going to give the full story when it comes to that.
A lot of times when it comes to statistics for a certain community, the people that are taking those statistics have absolutely nothing to do with that community. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, all right, let's kind of go ahead and let's check a box and let's leave it at that. I remember when COVID came out, probably a couple of months after COVID came out, I think it was in someplace on the East Coast. They had a station where you can get tested for COVID in a neighborhood that really was not that wealthy. And so what they did is they said, hey, come on over, get tested, no problem at all. And they told everyone in that community, get in your car and, it's a drive-through testing station. So you just get in your car, you get in line, kind of like a drive-through at McDonald's, whatever it might be, you get tested. So then you have people that lived in that neighborhood because they chose to do this in a neighborhood that was, a poor community, but majority of people in that neighborhood did not have cars. So what they did, they said, hey, you have to be in your car in order to get tested. So they did this in between like 3 or 4 it was like one block within 3 or 4 large apartment complexes. So you have people walking over there with their kids to get tested for COVID. And they said, no, you have to be in a car. And so what happened is, even though COVID testing was important, how did it really serve that community? So if they were to look at that community, then they would have known, like we talk about statistics, how many people in this community actually drive and how many people in this community actually take public transit. But instead, we're going to have a COVID testing site for individuals who have to drive up and get tested. So those statistics are definitely going to be flawed, because it did not serve that community in the way that it was supposed to serve that community.
Yeah. I'm good. Are we going to go to the question and answer session now?
Yes. So anybody who has questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask our panelists. We'll go one at a time in the order they're put in the chat or in order of who asked the question.
So we have our first question in the chat there. James, you see it?
Yes. Our first question is by Angeline. She asks, what are your recommendations for spotting different types of abuse during COVID? Are there any red flags virtually? I know you all touched on posting inappropriate things.
Are there any virtual red flags? Is that the question?
Yeah, like any signs that you might be able to pick up on the computer screen or any other type of signs that you might be able to pick up on.
Oh, okay.
Well, one way, I don't know, like if your friends are on Facebook or on Instagram and sometimes people post stuff, like about how they're feeling or what, went on in their day. They might give you some hints there by posting something on their, page or they might be withdrawn from Facebook. Like if you have friends that are on there every day and then all of a sudden, you don't see them for a couple of days, you probably want to check in and be like, hey, normally you post, I haven't heard from you in a few days. What's going on? Is everything okay? So those are some ways.
For me, working at a school, with remote learning, you deal with this almost on a daily basis. And it could be one person just kind of waking up on the wrong side of the bed. Lately it's been a lot of students that have been very frustrated with how online learning is going, which I completely understand. They're struggling because they can't separate their home life from their work life. So it's like that proper work-life balance. Some students may not have a proper workstation and they just kind of stay in the room all day long. So that feeling of isolation is kind of self-inflicted because of, how the learning situation is going right now. And so we had individuals who pretty much said, I don't feel like, something mild to where they say, I just don't feel like doing this anymore. And then someone else says, hey, so what are you going to do to yourself? Are you going to do something to yourself? And they're kind of edging on, those types of things. So even though it might be kind of subtle, it still amounts to something, because you have young and impressionable individuals kind of listen to what someone else is saying. And the other thing is, with technology today, you can communicate with millions of people in a matter of seconds. And so I really try to urge individuals to really watch what they pay attention to online, because there's so many different dangers there. There's so many different predators there. There's just so many different ways that, it's easy for, these future leaders to kind of get caught up in something they have no idea what they're walking into.
Well, I would say for the question, it would depend, I think, on the relationship you have with this person. So if you're just scrolling through social media and you're seeing signs, without really knowing the person, like, is this person a friend? Is it just an acquaintance? I would ask myself, those questions, because if it's somebody who you feel is a close friend to you, I would say reach out personally, and to see if they're okay. Ask, questions that, how are they doing? You notice, maybe on social media, whatever it is that you notice. But I would just determine just the level of friendship, because there's some people that you have on your page or on social media that you may not necessarily be friends with. So determine for yourself the level of friendship, if you have enough of a friendship with that person, or where you can go to them. Obviously, if you see something that requires a 911 call, if somebody's posting a video and they're getting beat up or something, those are obvious signs. But without having a personal relationship with someone, it would be difficult to tell, admittedly. But I think just depending on the level of relationship you have, paying attention to that person, the way that you know them as a friend, look for patterns, different, like Patrice said, pattern changes, different ways of speaking or interacting. If they typically are outwardly expressive and happy all the time, and then they started with the doom and gloom, maybe the negative posts, look for just pattern changes. And then if you're a good friend of theirs, I would just say reach out, not on social media necessarily, send a personal call or text message.
I like those tips, because those are all things we all have to pay attention for with our friends and stuff like that. Just tracking their mental health as well, but also for abuse and things like that. People do let you know how they're feeling on Instagram sometimes, and we'll post a post that communicates that they might be going through something, or a lack of posting, like you all mentioned. So thank you. That's definitely the type of information I think people are after. We got 2 more questions in the chat. James and Aaliyah, if y'all want to, we have Talia and Sergio who asked a question too. So sorry.
Our next question from Talia was, what are your recommendations for children since they are stuck at home observing the abuse?
Tell someone.
Right.
There's some, I know it seems simple. The kid they're not going to be able to fix it. They're absolutely not. So I would say share. There's a family member. There has to be someone. And if there isn't, for those kids that are on school, I know that I've seen with my son, they have the little private chat groups that they can engage in with their teachers. Send a teacher a private message about something that's happening. Yeah, we're not looking at them face to face, but use whatever resources that you have before you to say something, because the child is definitely not going to be able to help the situation alone. So I would just encourage them to reach out to whomever it is in their community that they can get the message to, so that they can get help.
You always have to have like some type of buddy. It's nice, even in my in my age, it's always nice to have someone that is going to give you their honest opinion, and someone that you trust 110%. And that's definitely one way that you can always get that positive perspective, or the right perspective, from someone that you trust. The other thing that we do at the school that I work at in the district, what I did is I started pretty much a method of communication for the teachers for the students and teachers. So if there's something, right now with teaching, it's different. Before you could have 25, 30 students in a classroom, you can close the door and you're just in that world. Well, now what happens is instead of having those 25 to 30 students inside that classroom in that one world, now each teacher is in a 25 to 30 different households. So the dynamics are completely different now. And so what we did, we established pretty much like a safety drill to where if there was something that was going on inside the home, students could notify the teachers. Now, sometimes the students, can they put something in the chat room? Absolutely. But sometimes something happens in the snap of a finger, you're panicked, you can't even press those buttons fast enough. So there's different hand signals that you could put up, let the teacher know, okay, there's something going on in your house right now. Okay, now there's 4, everything is okay. So when the teacher sees that, hold on, let me go ahead and check in with David real quick because something's not adding up right now. Or maybe we need to call the police over to David's house because something's going on in the background. There's been times when teachers and other students have observed a parent kind of grab a kid and throw him to the ground, and so kids see that and they know each other. So they kind of, other students can notify a teacher to make that phone call as a mandated reporter. But, different hand signals and things like that are definitely very important because not everyone is going to have the ability to get on that Zoom, scroll down to that, chat box, then sit there and type something in. And at the same time, they're looking over their shoulder to make sure that they're safe as well.
I guess if that's all the answers we have for that, that was amazing advice. I know that there's a couple young ones in here, and if they need to employ this advice, then they absolutely should. So for the next question about gaslighting, how does it relate to emotional abuse?
Because gaslighting, it creates a situation where you're second guessing what you saw. Like if I know I'm being, or say they're trying to convince you that you didn't see what you saw, or trying to convince you that they are, the head and you're supposed to lead. They're supposed to lead. The gaslighting creates this internal conflict within yourself where you're, okay, I know that I'm not crazy. I know that this is what I saw. I know that this is wrong. I know that I'm being abused. I know that this is, wrong, but you're continuing to tell me something different so that I adopt whatever, being manipulated basically. So that constant turmoil, that second guessing yourself, like, am I crazy, or is there something wrong with me? Or maybe he is right, maybe she is right, maybe, what they're saying to me is, the truth, and I'm the one who needs help. Maybe there's something wrong with me because I'm feeling this. So it creates this situation where you're constantly second guessing yourself because of what the manipulation is that's coming towards you. So that conflict, that internal conflict.
Yeah, that gaslighting is like that mental manipulation. I mean, you could be, the sky is blue. The sky's not blue, it's pink. And you just believe that. So imagine all the different values that you have and self-worth and that self-esteem that you have. And before you know it, someone puts something in your head to where you're like, I was wrong. I guess I was wrong. So you start second guessing yourself, your confidence goes down. Self-worth goes down, definitely, especially with young ladies. I mean, that's just, it's just one of the worst things that could ever happen. But, it happens, and it's just a form of manipulation that really makes you think that what you believe in and what you've been taught is completely wrong. And this one person has all the answers for you. And that person is conforming you. It's like molding you, shaping you into something that person wants instead of who you are and what you are.
Right. And I just like to add it really quick that gaslighting, it can be so severe that it really messes with your sanity. You start to think, well, am I crazy? Every time I say or do something, I'm being told it's not right, or, the sky is not blue, it's red, and I know it's blue. So it can really mess with your mental, with your sanity. So you really have to, be aware. And know that you're not crazy. That's a form of emotional abuse.
It's the power and control aspect of that manipulation. Like, I'm going to control your mind, you know, to take you away from everything that you
Tamara,
know.
for some reason the audio is not coming through.
Oh, it's not.
Oh.
Is that? Oh.
Hey, James.
Hear you.
Come through. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I think that was on my end.
I
I'm
heard
so
you
sorry.
before.
My bad. My
I was like, I
bad.
can
Tech.
hear
You know.
her.
You know. It's, my bad.
That's okay.
Right. We'll see if anybody, if we're gonna just do a quick, see if anybody else has any more questions.
Yeah, I actually have a question of my own about gaslighting. It's pretty simple. So gaslighting could take any kind of form, like with friendships, relationships, with any kind of relationship somebody has with any person.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not just tailored for domestic violence or specific to domestic violence. It could be in regular friendships, you know, it could be at work, it could be coming from your boss, it could be coming from your employee. It just, you know, it's just a form of emotional abuse.
Power and control.
Yeah, power and control. Trying to degrade you, trying to, you know, mess with your self-esteem. And it also could stem from jealousy. It could be, you know, a lot of different reasons why they're treating you that way.
And gaslighting, I mean, to me, the biggest definition is when you start to think that you're crazy when you know that you're not.
Exactly.
You know?
And I just want to add, while the questions have slowed, just, you know, personally, you guys have done a phenomenal job. And I know that you all may not have worked in this capacity in terms of together before, but it's been really seamless with you guys chiming in, piggybacking off of each other. So really appreciate all the, you know, the support that you guys have provided in context and making it really practical for all of the different real life situations. This was phenomenal, and we appreciate you all.
Also, this is Betty Williams, president of the NAACP. I just like to thank everyone as well. And you averaged this for a solid hour of 40 plus people. That means your conversation was so engaging, an average of 40 people could not leave. So that tells you that this conversation was needed, one. Two, one of our sponsors that's making sure that this happens with Sac State and the Center of African Peace and Conflict, Professor Ernest Uwazi. I see that he's been on and listening, and as I'm talking, I'm going to give him a chance to unmute himself and take the camera off so that he could say some words, because he called and said, can you get this conversation happening before December 31st? I'm like, yeah, the youth can do that. The youth can definitely do that. But I would like to give Professor Ernest Hawazi an opportunity to speak, if he can unmute himself and give some words as one of the sponsors.
Thank you very much, Barry, and each and every one of you. Some faces I recognize. I've really enjoyed this discussion and learned a lot. This is of this grant project we've been working on since September. This is the very first one, really engaging the young people. And trust me, I have learned a lot. And as we move forward in the next few weeks of this grant, I'm hoping we'll be able to even do more and broaden that discussion. I know you have 2 more coming along, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Betty and NAACP. The Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution is really pleased to again partner with your leadership and the young people for a very important discussion, domestic violence prevention, intervention, pertaining to people of African descent. It's a conversation we must have, but we do it with all the love, all the care, all the compassion, and sense of restorative justice and Ubuntu and the family preservation is important. So we keep the peace, and I look forward to further engagement. And we do have, for anybody I think was, I took, many of the comments made in terms of people that may feel they need to talk to a counselor. We do have professional counselors, African-American, Caribbean, you name it, Black folks, gotta put it that way, professionals who are under the grants project will be available to have either individual or family, conversations if needed, at least through the end of this grant period in December this month. And even if you start it and there is a need to continue it, trust me, with a positive mind, I'm sure we'll find a way to try to continue that, to make sure that whatever help is needed is provided. Okay. So again, thank you very, very much for sharing, for engaging, for contributing, and for really being a partner. I hope that we'll take this home and share and spread the love. Thanks, Betty. Peace.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder that this entire session has been recorded, and I'm going to ask Lorraine again if she can put the information. It will be part of our YouTube channel, and so she will put that information in the chat box, and once we get everything, well, Lorraine handles all of that, it will be on there immediately. So I just wanted to make sure that that happened. And thank you, Deshanis, Jamil, James, who else? Patrice, Aaliyah, all of you guys. The young people need to be commended for pulling this together. And I'm just so proud of you, especially what's going on in Sacramento right now. We're dealing with some other issues. And I think this conversation was timely as well. So thank you. And I appreciate everything that you're doing. So I'm going to hand it off back to either James or Jaleel. I don't know which one will be doing final comments or even more Q&A.
Well, we're scheduled to have about to go until about 7:25 for the Q&A. So if anybody has any final questions, feel free to ask them. We could be in here for about that amount of time, and then we'll start to wrap up around 7:25.
In addition, if any other panelists, would like to, say anything about your work or yourself, as we have some time at this for that.
I just want to make some final thoughts and comments when we look up at domestic violence. Is I just think people of color, and I heard Professor Wiley talk about the counseling that's free. We as people of color, we don't go to counseling, but I tell you, the more that I start to see us, the more we heal. And you know what, we have stuff. We have centuries of stuff that we have normalized because we learned how to deal with it. And what I'm learning and what people are learning is that things that we need to unload and talk about so we can heal and not have all these physical ailments and not these stresses that lead to domestic violence. Because like somebody says, domestic violence, that's not the cause. There's other underlining things that are going on that we're not dealing with. So I'm just hoping that people take the counseling and go and really go talk to someone. I tell people all the time, a lot of times people I talk to, it's just like two people in the room and you're just bouncing your stuff off someone and they help you with that, and really take heed to it if you can.
I'd like to say something. I don't want to really get too much on myself, but I do have a statement that I wanted to just share, something that I tell a lot of my clients, and that is that you teach people how to treat you by what you'll accept. And accepting abusive behavior in whatever form of abuse is teaching that person that, they can do to you whatever they wish because of the fact that you're accepting it. I know that there's a larger underlying issue that we have to get to as to why someone would allow themselves to be treated in such a manner. And like the doctor said, those are deeper, more mental health issues that we can discuss, that they can discuss once they get help. But I think just to simplify something that cannot necessarily, be simplified overall, but just to try and give a little bit of a roadmap is just if you want to be treated in a different way, there's ways that you can teach people how to treat you by what you accept. I'm not blaming the victim. I want to make it clear that I'm not blaming someone who's being abused, but I just want you all to think that you are empowered to show someone how they're going to treat you by what you'll accept. And I know, trust me, I get it. It's difficult when you're in that situation. I understand that there's underlying issues, but you absolutely have the power. Do not allow anyone to continuously strip the power that you, by your birthright, have in terms of how you allow someone to treat you. And I get that it's probably easier said than done, but just something just to help you every day. If you can write that down, or maybe, I don't know, put it in your phone, whatever, just do not accept, the treatment that someone is going to give you. You're the person, you're empowered to show them that you deserve more, you deserve better. And I think that it starts from within, and just know that you have the control over that.
I always say, be the change you want to see. And the reason why is because, over 400 years ago, we had individuals that were trying to tear us down as a people. And we definitely have not come as far as we thought we had. At the end of the day, it makes I'm not, kind of like what Tamara said, it's just sad to see some of those same circumstances today, and we're doing that to ourselves. It's tough walking into a prison when you see all these Black men in prison, and not all of them deserve to be there. It's tough in the communities when you see these Black children that do not have those Black fathers to lead them down the right path because their freedom was taken away. Now, let's be honest, some people that are incarcerated, yeah, they belong there, but we have some that don't. And you could turn on the TV and it's like every week you're hearing a story about how somebody was wrongfully convicted and lost 20-something, 40-something years of his life for something he never did. So now, we're at a position in life where we can really look at ourselves and analyze what we're doing to be the change that we want to see. Because if we don't model that change, then we become part of the problem and not the solution. You have two types of people, those that watch things happen and those that make things happen. I like to make things happen. And I like to work with people that make things happen. And those people that like to watch things happen, I like to bring those people with me so I can make sure that they understand how I see things and how we make things happen so they can experience that, because not everyone has that mentor. Not everyone has that type of individual that can help them get to that next level or answer those questions, those courageous conversations that we talk about. Not everyone has that. So I urge everyone on this panel, like, we can all extend a hand to someone else who needs some help. We can all extend that hand to someone else who needs some type of mentoring or some type of, hey, honest feedback or constructive criticism. And for the youngsters that are on this panel, listen, I'm 46 years old. I work with kids and I still learn from them on a daily basis. So don't think just because you're a youngster and you're talking to an individual that's old enough to be your parent or whatever it might be, that they know everything, because we still learn on a daily basis. So the fact that we have some youngsters putting this together, it's phenomenal. I don't know if you guys really understood what you've done here, but that right there, this is, when I was your age, I wasn't at this level. What you guys are doing is very powerful, because number one, you're doing it for your people, because you see something that needs a change. You want to be the change that you want to see. And the fact that you guys did this, and this is priceless. And I'm telling you that from a 46-year-old man. I don't think you guys really understand what you've done here, but I thank you guys very much.
Yes, I'll also like to just piggyback on what David said. This was phenomenal. And the youth that put this on, you guys, you did a great job, and continue to do the work, because that's what it takes. We're going to have to do the work. So you guys did excellent. And I just want to thank you for inviting me to the panel.
Yes, you guys are awesome.
Yeah, I want to thank the panelists so much for coming and being with us here tonight and telling us about domestic violence. I've learned so much in this last hour, and I feel so much more informed than I ever would have been otherwise. So I just want to thank you again so much for taking your time to inform all of us and teach us, because it really is a huge issue and it's not getting the attention it deserves. And I mean, that change starts with us, we tell others what we've learned today, and we continue to spread our knowledge and make sure that this issue isn't ignored or isn't not talked about. Make it so that it's at the forefront of people's minds when they think about their position in life and how they're living, to think about others in that way. So I want to thank you all so much again for your insight about what domestic violence is.
And piggybacking off of James, I do want to thank you guys also. And then I guess we are wrapping this up right now.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to remind you guys that we do have another seminar on December 8th at 6 p.m. And also, thank you for attending this meeting, and please remember to fill out the Google doc that Jaleel put in the chat. It will let us know who was here in attendance. So thank you.
Yes, so our next seminar, our upcoming second seminar, is on December 8th, where we're going to go into more solutions to getting out of domestic violence situations, talking more on that side of it, what to do in that situation, what to do when someone else is in that situation. We touched a bit on it during this meeting, but we'll expand it, and that'll be the main focus. If you want to attend this meeting, which many people have already, but our Instagram, which Jaleel just put in the chat, we have a Google form on our bio there, so just fill that out, and then just to RSVP, so we know that you'll be going to that second meeting. Most important, we want to thank everyone. I just want to thank everyone again. This has been an incredible hour of time that I'm so glad that I've gotten to experience.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We hope that everybody has a safe and good night, and we appreciate everybody taking their time. Please follow up with us. We want to make sure we can get everybody resources. So if you fill out that form, we'll be able to send you any information. We can send you the links that to the video of this conversation, and we can stay connected with you. We'll send you membership forms, trying to make sure you become an NAACP member. So yes, we're definitely trying to stay active in Sacramento as the youth, and we want to make sure that we're connecting with our adult branch, because they do, I'm sure you all know, a great amount of work as well. So we just are trying to follow in their footsteps, and we're glad to have y'all support, because it would not have been a good conversation without the adult branch and our panelists that came through and held it down. So thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Yes, please come through to the other events, and hopefully it will be just as informative and insightful for everybody. And hopefully as many people can come. Please share it with your friends and family. If you are all on this call, we are looking forward to continuing these conversations as well. And I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything, but this has been excellent. So thank you so much. All right. Okay, y'all. I think we're all good. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're saying good night now.
Yeah.
Yes, we're saying good night. And,
Appreciate you. Thanks for
and
the
Lorraine,
opportunity.
you can go ahead and end the meeting officially and turn everything down. Thank you.
Bye.